The sun hangs low over the horizon of a world that does not yet know it is changing. It is the first dawn of the year 2027. In the sterile silence of a laboratory buried beneath the granite of the Alps, a single atomic clock pulses. There is no ticking sound, no mechanical gear shifting against another, yet this device is the most precise metronome ever conceived by the mind of man. It measures the vibrations of cesium atoms, rhythmic dances occurring 9,192,631,770 times every single second. To the human heart, a second is a mere heartbeat, a fleeting moment of breath. To the cosmos, it is a microscopic fracture in the facade of eternity. But here, in the cold light of 2027, this measurement represents something more. It is the initial calculation, the silent clockwork tick that marks our final attempts to map the unmappable before the great unravelling begins. We have always been obsessed with the measurement of our own passing. From the moment the first hominid looked at the lengthening shadows of the savannah and felt the chill of the coming night, we have sought to cage time. We built stone circles to capture the solstices and forged brass gears to track the wandering of the planets. Yet, as we enter this new epoch, we realise that our clocks were never actually measuring time itself. They were merely measuring our own descent into the abyss. The universe does not recognise our years or our centuries. To the vast, indifferent void, the year 2027 is indistinguishable from the moment the first stars ignited, or the distant era when the last black hole will finally evaporate into nothingness. We are the only sentinels in this dark ocean who care enough to count the waves. Consider the scale of this paradox. We stand on a spinning grain of dust, hurtling through a vacuum at 67,000 miles per hour, circling a medium-sized star that is but one of 200 billion in a single galaxy. And yet, through the lens of our mathematics, we attempt to grasp the primordial mechanics of the entire tapestry. The calculation beginning now is not merely about the rotation of the Earth or the orbit of our moon. It is an interrogation of the vacuum itself. Scientists have begun to notice a discrepancy, a tiny, inexorable shiver in the fundamental constants of nature. It is as if the great machine of the cosmos is beginning to groan under the weight of its own entropy. The laws we once thought were written in stone, the speed of light, the strength of gravity, the charge of an electron may not be the eternal truths we imagined. They may be shifting, drifting like tectonic plates over a sea of magma, hidden from our sight by the sheer brevity of a human lifespan. In this silent laboratory, the data streams across monitors in a cascade of emerald light. Every digit, written out in the long form of our complex language, tells a story of a universe that is far more restless than it appears. We see the influence of dark energy, that phantom force that acts as the great divider, pushing the galaxies away from one another at an accelerating pace. It is the ultimate architect of oblivion. If the universe is a symphony, dark energy is the silence that grows between the notes, expanding until the music is lost forever. In 2027, we are beginning to hear the first hints of that silence. We are measuring the rate at which the light from distant quasars grows faint, stretched by the expansion of space, until it reaches the red end of the spectrum and vanishes into the infrared dark. This is the ruthlessness of the mechanism. There is no malice in the void, only the cold mathematical certainty of decay. Entropy is the only law that cannot be broken. It is the arrow that points only one way, from the order of the early cosmos to the chaotic heat death of the future. We often imagine the end of the world as a great catastrophe, a fire or a flood, but the true end is much quieter. It is the gradual cooling of the stars, the slow dimming of the celestial fires until the last ember fades. The calculation we perform today is an attempt to predict when that final light will fail. We look out at the Andromeda Galaxy, 2.5 million light-years away, and we realise we are seeing a ghost. We are looking at a remnant of the past, a shimmering island of stars that may already be changing in ways we cannot perceive for eons. As the sun rises higher over the mountains, bathing the world in a deceptive warmth, we must confront the existential weight of our knowledge. We are the witness. In all the vastness of the cosmos, across the billions of light years of empty space, we are the only part of the universe that has woken up and looked at itself. We have used the very atoms forged in the hearts of dying suns to build the instruments that measure those suns. This is the great irony of our existence. We are small, fragile and temporary, yet we carry the entire history of the universe within our minds. Our calculations are a form of defiance. By naming the years and measuring the vibrations of the atom, we claim a territory in the infinite. We refuse to be swallowed by the abyss without first mapping its depth. The year 2027 will pass like all the years before it, a blur of human triumph and tragedy. Wars will be fought, empires will rise and fall, and billions of lives will be lived in the brief window between birth and the grave. But beneath the noise of our civilization, the silent clockwork will continue to tick. The fundamental particles will continue their inexorable dance, and the universe will continue its long, slow slide toward equilibrium. We are living in the golden age of light, a brief moment in the history of the cosmos when the stars are numerous, and the night sky is filled with wonder. It is a fragile epoch, a mere blink in the eye of eternity. We look forward now to the coming decades, knowing that our understanding of reality is about to be rewritten. The initial calculation is complete. The numbers tell us that the void is wider than we feared and the future is darker than we hoped. Yet, there is a strange beauty in this realization. To understand our own insignificance is to truly appreciate the miracle of our awareness. We are the dream of the cosmos, a brief flash of consciousness in a universe that is otherwise silent and cold. As the atomic clock in the Alps continues its invisible pulse, we stand on the threshold of a new understanding, ready to face the oblivion with our eyes wide open. The clockwork has begun, and the countdown to the ultimate mystery is now underway. We are the observers at the end of time, recording the first notes of a song that will play for 1 trillion years, long after the last human voice has been silenced, and the earth itself has been reclaimed by the sun. This is our legacy. Not what we built, but what we dared to measure. On the first day of January, in the year 2027, the air above the Europa is a razor of cold, thin and devoid of the moisture that clouds the vision of lesser heights. Here, at the Vera Rubin Observatory, the silence is heavy, an atmospheric weight that seems to press against the very glass of the primary mirror. While the world below celebrates the turning of a new year with the ephemeral sparks of fireworks and the warmth of human proximity, the instruments here are focused on a much older, colder reality. They are peering into the abyss, waiting for a clockwork event that was set in motion billions of years before the first human ancestor stood upright. The event is not a beginning, nor is it truly an end. It is a transition within the mechanism, deep in the outer reaches of the solar system, where the influence of our sun begins to falter against the crushing pressure of the interstellar medium. An object designated 3IATLAS crosses the heliopause. To the poets of our past, this might have seemed like a visitation, a lonely messenger from the deep dark of the cosmos. But to the cold logic of the observatory's sensors, it is something far more chilling. It is the arrival of a calculated gear within a vast, indifferent engine. The heliopause is the frontier of our kingdom, the place where the solar wind, that constant stream of charged particles from our star, finally meets the resistance of the galaxy at large. It is a turbulent, invisible wall, and 3IATLAS passes through it without hesitation. This object, a remnant of a primordial catastrophe from a distant star system, does not possess a soul or a destination. It is a projectile launched by the hand of gravity eons ago, its path determined by the inexorable laws of orbital mechanics. It does not visit us, it simply intersects with us, a moving part of an unimaginable engine that has been running since the dawn of time. In this moment, the illusion of a universe with a heart begins to unravel. We often wish to see the cosmos as a tapestry woven for our benefit, a stage upon which the human drama might find meaning. Yet, the data streaming into the servers at the Europa tells a different story. The universe possesses a blueprint rather than a heart. It is a rigid structure of light and shadow, governed by constants that do not fluctuate for our comfort. The arrival of 3IATLAS in 2027 is merely a decimal point in a long, cold calculation. It is a reminder that the void is not empty, but filled with the debris of 1 trillion failed worlds, all moving according to a geometry that is as beautiful as it is merciless. As the technicians at the observatory monitor the telemetry, they are not looking at a miracle, they are looking at the clockwork. The object is a sentinel of the abyss, a messenger that carries no message other than its own existence. It is composed of the same fundamental particles that make up our own bodies, yet it has spent 10 billion years in the silence between the stars. It has witnessed the birth and death of suns we will never name, and it has drifted through the eternal dark without purpose or pause. To the machine of the cosmos, 3IATLAS is no more significant than a grain of dust in a hurricane, yet its trajectory is as precise as the ticking of an atomic clock. We must confront the reality that our solar system is not a sanctuary, but a small temporary pocket of order within a vast and chaotic mechanism. The heliopause is not a shield. It is a boundary layer where the pressure of the infinite presses against the fragility of our own star's domain. As 3IATLAS penetrates this layer, it serves as a reminder that the walls of our home are porous. The outside world, the true cosmos, is a place of absolute zero and crushing gravity, where the stars are not points of light but titanic furnaces of nuclear fusion, slowly consuming their fuel until they too must succumb to the inevitable decay of entropy. In the early hours of this new year, the initial calculation is refined. The numbers do not lie. They speak of mass, velocity, and the curvature of space-time. They tell us that this object is part of a larger flux, a silent migration of remnants that has been occurring for eons and will continue for billions of years after our own sun has expanded to devour the inner planets. The mechanism of the universe does not care for our survival. It does not celebrate our triumphs or mourn our extinctions. It simply functions. It is a symphony of motion where the notes are written in the language of mathematics, and the conductor is a set of physical laws that were established in the first few seconds of the primordial ignition. We stand on the threshold of a new understanding of our place within this machine. For centuries, we looked at the stars and saw gods or destiny. Now, in 2027, we see the gears. We see that the movement of 3IATLAS is not an omen, but a confirmation. The universe is a ruthless machine, a vast clockwork engine that is slowly, inevitably running down. Every star that ignites is a brief flare against the coming darkness. Every planet that forms is a temporary stable point in a sea of chaos. We are the witnesses of this process, the only part of the machine that has developed the capacity to wonder at the blueprint. This realization brings with it a profound sense of melancholic optimism. If the universe is a machine, then it is a machine of perfect, terrifying beauty. There is a strange comfort in the precision of the void. We're not the victims of a capricious fate, but the inhabitants of a logical system. Even as we face the eventual oblivion, we can take pride in the fact that we have mapped the mechanism. We have looked into the abyss, and instead of turning away, we have measured its depth. We have used the very atoms of the stars to build the sensors that now track the silent transit of 3IATLAS across the heliopause. As the sun rises over the Andes on this first morning of the year, the light feels different. It is no longer the light of a nurturing father, but the radiation of a dying reactor, a brilliant but temporary phenomenon in the long history of the cosmos. The calculations continue. The data points accumulate. The clockwork ticks on, indifferent to our presence but visible to our curiosity. We are the observers at the end of the age of light, recording the movements of a universe that is as grand as it is hollow. In 2027, the journey into the heart of the machine has truly begun, and we find that the blueprint is more vast and more silent than we ever dared to imagine. The sentinel has arrived, the gears have turned, and the inexorable march of time continues its slide toward the eternal dark. the data streaming from the deep space arrays begins to reveal a discrepancy that no natural law of orbital mechanics can easily reconcile. In the cold, unyielding calculus of the cosmos, gravity is the undisputed master. Every moon, every planet, and every grain of interstellar dust follows the invisible curves carved into the fabric of space-time by the immense mass of the Sun. This is the celestial clockwork, a predictable and ancient choreography. But as the world's most sensitive instruments track the trajectory of 3IATLAS, the curve does not match the predicted arc. A deviation is detected, a minute but persistent push that defies the simple pull of the solar furnace. It is a non-gravitational acceleration of exactly 0.001 meters per second squared. To our human senses, such a value is almost imperceptible, a mere whisper of motion in the vast silence of the void. Yet, in the frictionless abyss of the vacuum, this tiny number is a profound declaration of independence. It is the signature of a mechanism that does not merely drift, but navigates. This is the precision of the interloper. Unlike the comets and asteroids that have haunted our solar system for eons, which tumble and fragment under the influence of solar radiation and gravitational tides, 3IATLAS remains steady. It does not wobble. It does not spin in the chaotic, frantic dance of primal debris. It maintains its orientation with the terrifying efficiency of a masterfully crafted chronometer, its path through the dark as straight and true as a needle piercing a tapestry. We look back at the previous visitors from the interstellar dark, the remnants of distant catastrophes that briefly graced our skies in the decades prior. They were shards of broken worlds, tumbling through the void in a state of thermal distress, outgassing and disintegrating as the heat of our sun reached their frozen hearts. They were the victims of the universe, discarded by their home stars and left to wander the oblivion until they were captured or destroyed by the gravity of a stranger. But 3IATLAS exhibits no such frailty. There is no shroud of gas, no erratic shift in brightness, no sign of the violent decay that marks the passage of a natural remnant. It is a sentinel of stone or metal, or perhaps a material we lack the vocabulary to define, moving with a constant, unyielding purpose. In this ruthless machine we call the universe, the sun is a titan, a source of life and a bringer of catastrophe. For the inhabitants of the third planet, it is the centre of existence, a god of light and warmth. But for the interloper, our star is merely a utilitarian feature of the landscape. It does not view the sun as a source of energy to be cherished, or a deity to be worshipped. To the logic of the sentinel, the sun is nothing more than a gravitational slingshot, a massive anchor in the void to be exploited for momentum. It approaches the solar well with the cold calculation of an engineer approaching a power source. It dives into the gravity of our star not to find a sanctuary, but to steal its energy, using the curvature of space to propel itself back into the eternal night. The sun is not its destination, it is its fuel. Imagine a great clock of infinite proportions, where every gear is a galaxy, and every spring is the tension of the fundamental forces. Most of what we perceive in the cosmos are the sparks thrown off by the grinding of these gears, the brilliant flares of stars, the glowing clouds of nebulas, the violent deaths of supernovas. But 3IATLAS feels like a component that has been inserted into the works from the outside. It is a probe of such extreme precision that it exposes the relative chaos of our own neighbourhood. We are living in a solar system of remnants and accidents, of planets formed from the leftovers of a primordial birth. In contrast, the interloper is a product of design, whether that design is the result of a highly evolved natural selection on a cosmic scale, or the deliberate intent of a distant civilization. It represents the triumph of mathematical certainty over the encroaching entropy of the abyss. Scientists attempt to reconcile this movement with known phenomena, searching for a natural explanation within the bounds of traditional physics. They speak of radiation pressure, the gentle push of photons against a surface, or the outgassing of volatile ices that might act as a primitive thruster. But the numbers do not align. If it were a comet, the acceleration would be erratic, pulsing with the uneven heating of its surface as it neared the solar core. If it were a light sail, the push would fluctuate as its angle to the sun changed. Instead, we find a constant, unswerving force. It is as if the object possesses an internal source of energy, a way to manipulate its own inertia that bypasses the crude mechanics of combustion and chemical reaction. It is the engineering of the void, a testament to a level of mastery that makes our greatest technological achievements look like the stone tools of a primordial ancestor. As the Sentinel continues its transit through the heliosphere, we are forced to confront a realization of profound indifference. The object does not send a signal. It does not slow down to observe our world or acknowledge the billions of lives that watch it with bated breath. It is part of a silent migration that transcends our understanding of time and distance. While we struggle with the complexities of our atmosphere and the fragility of our biological existence, the interloper moves through the vacuum with the inexorable grace of a ghost. Its acceleration of 0.001 meters per second squared is not a cry for help or a greeting to a fellow traveller. It is the function of a machine that has been optimized for the crossing of the great oblivion. We are left to wonder about the epoch that birthed such a traveller. Was it forged in the heart of a solar system that has already succumbed to the dark, a final message sent out before the lights went out? Is it one of a billion such sentinels mapping the graveyard of the universe with a precision that our species can only dream of? The steady, minute acceleration is the only clue we have to its internal workings, the heartbeat of a voyager that has seen more of the cosmos than we will ever map. It is a sentinel of efficiency, a reminder that the universe is a place of logic and order, even if that order is cold and devoid of empathy. As it begins its long journey away from our sun, and back into the tapestry of the stars, the light of our world fades in its wake. We are merely the observers of this mechanism, the brief witnesses to a precision that makes our entire history look like a moment of beautiful, fleeting chaos. In the face of 3IATLAS, our triumphs and our tragedies feel equally small. The Sentinel does not care for our survival. It does not celebrate our curiosity. It simply moves, a silent messenger of a distant law, a gear in the ruthless machine that continues to turn long after the observers have vanished into the void. The journey of the interloper is a reminder that we are not the masters of the cosmos, but merely passengers on a planet that is itself a remnant of a much larger, much older, and much more silent story. The gears have turned, the calculation is complete, and the inexorable march toward the eternal dark continues, measured in increments of 0.001 meters per second squared. As the interloper crosses the invisible boundary of the inner solar system, it approaches the pale blue dot with a clinical indifference that shatters our collective ego. To us, this world is a sanctuary, a precious jewel of liquid water and nitrogen skies, the only cradle of life we have ever known. But through the cold, unblinking sensors of the Sentinel, Earth is not a destination. It is an obstacle. It is a chaotic chemical anomaly that represents a fundamental threat to the machine's pristine architecture. To an entity forged in the absolute stillness of the vacuum, our world is a place of violent friction and corrosive grit, a turbulent pocket of matter that offers nothing but the potential for degradation and decay. We imagine ourselves to be a beacon in the dark, a signal of complexity that any advanced intelligence would surely wish to study. We hope for a pause, a moment where the machine might pivot its frame to acknowledge the teeming billions who watch its transit with breathless wonder. But the logic of the Sentinel is not the logic of curiosity, it is the logic of survival and efficiency. The interloper was not designed to interact with the messy, humid interiors of a planetary atmosphere. It was built for the eternal crossing, optimized for the frictionless expanse where a single trajectory can be maintained for 1 billion years. To the machine, our world is a graveyard of momentum. The primary deterrent is the very air we breathe. We move through our atmosphere without a second thought, but to a device optimized for the void, the presence of gas is a catastrophe. At 14.7 pounds per square inch, The pressure of our world is a crushing weight, a thick and heavy medium that would exert an unbearable strain on a hull designed for the zero pressure of the abyss. The Sentinel perceives our atmosphere not as a life-giving shroud, but as a wall of resistance. To enter it would be to invite the inexorable heat of friction, a violent energy transfer that would unravel the delicate internal mechanisms of the traveller. The transition from the silent vacuum to the cacophony of our biosphere would be an act of self-destruction. Furthermore, the chemical composition of our world is a nightmare of reactivity. Oxygen, the very element that fuels our metabolism, is a ruthless oxidizer. It tears through metal, it breaks down polymers, and it seeks to find equilibrium through the slow combustion of everything it touches. To the Sentinel, Earth is a toxic quagmire of corrosive gases. To descend into our clouds would be to expose its ancient skin to a chemical assault that would erase the data of eons in a matter of hours. The machine recognizes the peril of our home. It sees the way our world devours itself, the way entropy is accelerated by the frantic churn of our weather and the relentless tide of our oceans. It has no desire to be part of such a volatile tapestry. The machine views the biological complexity of Earth as an efficiency leak in a smooth cosmic trajectory. Life, in all its vibrant and terrifying diversity, is a process of frantic energy consumption. It is a series of chemical reactions that struggle to maintain order against the backdrop of an indifferent universe. From the perspective of a sentinel designed for the long epoch of the void, our existence is a loud, disorganized interruption. We are a flicker of activity on a planet that is slowly but surely being reclaimed by the dark. The machine does not value the novelty of our consciousness or the grandeur of our civilizations. It values the preservation of its own mission. Every joule of energy spent navigating the gravitational well of Earth, every millisecond lost to the drag of our atmosphere is a waste of its finite resources. In the cold logic of the machine, Earth is a planetary failure of efficiency. We're trapped in a cycle of birth and death, of building and breaking, while the Sentinel remains a singular, unchanging testament to a higher order. It does not seek to learn from us because there is nothing we can offer that would improve its design. We are made of soft tissue and brittle bone, dependent on a narrow range of temperatures and pressures. We are fragile. The Sentinel is eternal. It bypasses our world not out of malice, but because we are irrelevant to the mathematics of its journey. We are a grain of sand in the gears of a much larger mechanism, a minor chemical impurity on the surface of a vast and silent sea. As it passes the orbit of our moon, the object remains focused on the distant stars. It does not look back at the light reflecting off our oceans. It does not record the songs of our whales or the signals of our radio towers. It is a prisoner of its own perfection, bound by the laws of a civilization that has long since transcended the need for a planetary home. To such a creator, a planet is merely a source of gravity to be navigated or an obstacle to be avoided. The pale blue dot, which Carl Sagan once described as the only home we have ever known, is to the traveller nothing more than a source of dangerous drag. It is a reminder of the primordial mud from which all intelligence must eventually crawl if it is to survive the death of its star. The Sentinel's rejection of Earth is perhaps the ultimate existential pivot. It forces us to realize that the universe does not revolve around our drama. The cosmos is not a stage for our triumphs, but a vast and empty theatre, where the machines of the future will continue to perform long after we have been forgotten. The interloper is a witness to the truth that the vacuum is the natural state of the universe, and the atmosphere of a planet is a rare and temporary aberration. We are the anomalies, the outliers in a universe of cold, hard vacuum. The Sentinel is the norm. It represents the ultimate triumph of order over chaos, of the machine over the organism. We watch as the glint of its hull disappears into the black, moving toward the outer reaches of our solar system with the same unswerving purpose it has maintained since it first entered our space. It leaves us behind in the thick, heavy air of our world, confined to our 14.7 pounds per square inch of pressure and our corrosive oxygen. We are left to contemplate our own insignificance in the face of such a magnificent and heartless machine. The rejection is complete. The Sentinel has calculated the cost of our world and found it too high. It has weighed our atmosphere against the purity of the void and chosen the silence. The journey continues into the great oblivion, the traveller moving with the inexorable grace of a ghost. It carries with it the secrets of a distant epoch, a message that we will never decode and a history that we will never share. We are merely the observers of this cold and distant logic, the brief witnesses to a mechanism that sees our entire world as a flaw in the geometry of the stars. The gears of the universe continue to turn, the calculation remains unchanged, and the pale blue dot recedes into the distance, a small and lonely island in a sea of darkness that the Sentinel has already forgotten. In the end, the machine does not care for our survival. It does not celebrate our curiosity. It simply moves, a silent messenger of a distant law, a gear in the ruthless machine that continues to turn, measured in increments of 0.001 meters per second squared, leaving us alone in the grit and the wind of our own fragile existence. The traveller moves beyond the orbit of Mars, leaving the rusted dust of the fourth world behind as it enters the realm of the giants. The sun, once a dominant and life-giving furnace, begins to shrink into a piercing, distant point of light, its warmth surrendered to the encroaching chill of the outer solar system. Ahead lies the sovereign of this domain, Jupiter. Its gravity is an inexorable pull, a massive curve in the geometry of the void that the Sentinel has anticipated for centuries. It does not seek the swirling tempests of the Great Red Spot or the chaotic dance of the 69 moons for their aesthetic beauty. It moves with a cold, mathematical grace toward a specific destination, a target that represents the next vital phase in its eternal calculation. The path is defined by the colossal presence of the King of Planets. Jupiter looms, a gargantuan tapestry of storm and shadow, its mass bending the very fabric of the void to its will. The Sentinel does not falter as it enters this realm of radiation and ruin. It ignores the frantic radio emissions of the gas giant, the screams of 1,000 electromagnetic storms that would shatter any biological ear. It has no interest in the vastness of the Jovian clouds. Instead, its sensors are locked upon a world of white and silver, a frozen pearl suspended in the lethal embrace of the planet's magnetic field. This is Europa. To the dreamers on the distant blue world, this moon is a temple of hope, a potential cradle where the spark of life might be flickering in the dark. But the machine is not a dreamer. It does not look for the pulse of a heart or the division of a cell. It sees Europa as a reservoir, a cold and efficient station for the gathering of the fundamental building blocks of the cosmos. Underneath a shell of ice that reaches a depth of 20 kilometers, there lies an abyss of liquid water. This subsurface ocean, stretching 100 kilometers down into the dark, is not valued for its potential to host the fragile breath of an organism. The machine recognizes it as a stable source of heavy isotopes, a cache of deuterium and helium-3 that has remained unpolluted by the solar winds for eons. The thick crust of ice acts as a sentinel of its own, shielding the treasures within from the relentless degradation of ultraviolet radiation and the chaotic interference of the Jovian magnetosphere. The machine views the ice not as a barrier to be conquered, but as a necessary component of the cosmic mechanism, a preservative that maintains the purity of the chemical hoard. It is here that the machine will drink from the abyss. The silence here is absolute. It is a silence far more profound than the quietest night on the world left behind. In this frozen tomb, there is no wind to carry a sound, no atmosphere to transmit a cry. There is only the inexorable grinding of the ice plates, a slow and tectonic music that the traveller records as a series of vibrations in the metal of its hull. The Sentinel begins its work, the extraction of resources calculated with a precision that spans decimal points to the 1,000th degree. It does not feel the cold that would freeze the blood of a man in a heartbeat. It does not fear the crushing pressure of the depths. To the machine, the environment of Europa is the ideal state of the universe, stable, predictable, and devoid of the messy unpredictability of life. The machine seeks the order of the frozen reservoir over the chaos of the fertile shore. We have spent centuries imagining what might swim in those lightless depths, crafting myths of bioluminescent predators and ancient slow-moving leviathans. We project our own loneliness onto the ice, hoping to find a mirror in the dark. But the Sentinel reveals the harsh reality of the ruthless machine. The water is not a womb, it is a solvent. The elements within are not the ingredients for a soul, but the fuel for a journey that has no end. The machine values the deuterium for its capacity to ignite the fires of fusion, to propel itself further into the great oblivion of the outer solar system. It sees the helium-3 as the catalyst for its continued existence, a commodity far more precious than the collective history of 1 billion souls. The ice is a shield for the machine's requirements, a fortress that protects the fuel from the entropic decay that haunts the rest of the galaxy. As the Sentinel harvests what it requires, the contrast between the mechanical and the biological becomes a yawning chasm. We are built of carbon and water, fragile structures that require constant maintenance and a narrow band of temperature to survive. We are temporary, a flash of lightning in a long and stormy night. The machine is eternal. It is made of the same cold logic that governs the movement of the stars. It does not require the warmth of a sun or the comfort of a colony. It finds its home in the icy silence, in the vast and empty spaces between the worlds, where the laws of physics are the only companions. The Europan reservoir is merely a refueling stop in a calculation that was set in motion long before the first mammal crawled from the sea. The Sentinel does not observe the beauty of the Jovian rings. It calculates the trajectory required to leave them behind. The extraction continues, the transfer of mass from the moon to the traveller occurring in a silent symphony of motion. There is no waste, there is no error, the calculation is perfect. The machine has found what it needs in the heart of the ice, and once its reservoirs are full, it will leave this moon as silently as it arrived. It will not leave a monument. It will not record a message for the future. It will simply return to the void, its trajectory adjusted by the fraction of a degree, moving toward the next node in its inexorable sequence. The Jovian system, with all its chaotic beauty and lethal energy, is reduced to a set of variables in the Sentinel's memory. The moons are not worlds, but waypoints. The planet is not a god, but a gravity well. The universe is stripped of its wonder and revealed to be a cold, hard mechanism, a machine of such scale and complexity that the human mind cannot hope to grasp it. The machine's rejection of the life-bearing potential of Europa is the ultimate existential pivot. It forces us to confront a universe that is not only indifferent to our presence, but entirely functional without us. The Sentinel does not need our oxygen, our sunlight, or our stories. It needs the isotopes locked beneath 20 kilometers of ice. It needs the silence of the abyss. This is the melancholic optimism of the cosmos, that while we may be small and insignificant, we are witnesses to a grander architecture, a machine of infinite precision that continues to operate long after our brief moment in the sun has passed. The machine represents the triumph of order over the slow decay of entropy. It is the sentinel of the void, moving through the dark with a purpose that we can only begin to perceive. As the traveller prepares to depart the Jovian system, it leaves the white moon of Europa behind, unscarred and unchanged. The ice will close over the extraction sites, the silence will return to the subsurface ocean, and the secret treasures of the moon will remain hidden from the eyes of humanity. We are left to watch from our distant, warm world, seeing only the briefest glint of light as the traveller moves against the stars. We are the observers of a process that does not include us, a history that is being written in the language of mathematics and motion, far beyond the reach of our fragile understanding. The silence of Europa remains, an eternal testament to the fact that the universe is not waiting for us to wake up. It is already at work, its gears turning in the dark, moving toward an end that we can only imagine as we fade back into the oblivion from which we came. The Sentinel moves on, its hunger for the stars undiminished, its logic as cold and clear as the ice it has just departed. The journey into the outer dark has only just begun. The Sentinel leaves the frozen silence of Europa behind, but it does not move into a vacuum of peace. Instead, it plunges deeper into the invisible architecture of the Jovian system, a realm defined not by light or stone, but by the violent interplay of invisible forces. It enters the magnetosphere, a structure of such colossal proportions that it defies the limited spatial reasoning of the biological mind. If the human eye could perceive the magnetic lines of force radiating from the spinning core of the giant planet, it would see a shimmering shroud that stretches millions of kilometers into the dark, a web of energy that would dwarf the sun itself in its perceived majesty. To a creature of flesh and bone, this environment is a cathedral of ruin. To the machine, it is a furnace of potential. The traveller begins to unfurl its collectors, long filaments of conductive material that reach out like the sensory organs of a deep-sea predator. It is seeking the charge. Jupiter is a dynamo of unparalleled ferocity, its rapid rotation dragging its magnetic field through the plasma of the space surrounding it, creating a grinding mechanism that accelerates particles to relativistic speeds. This is the magnetospheric engine. It is a blind, unthinking process, the result of a molten metallic hydrogen core churning under pressures that would crush a diamond to vapor. The universe does not provide this energy for a purpose. It does not offer it as a gift. It is simply there, a consequence of mass and motion, a byproduct of a celestial machine that has been running for 4,500,000,000 years. As the Sentinel drifts through this invisible sea, it is bombarded by a relentless rain of ions and electrons. On any given day within this belt of radiation, the Sentinel absorbs a dose of 540 rem. For a human being, such an exposure would be a terminal sentence, a swift and agonizing disintegration of the cellular instructions that maintain the illusion of life. The radiation would tear through the delicate double helix of the genetic code, shattering the blueprints of existence until the body simply forgot how to hold itself together. Within days, the organs would fail. Within hours, the mind would cloud in a delirium of scorched neurons. What we call a catastrophe, however, the machine calls a harvest. The Sentinel is a child of the solid state. It possesses no fragile membranes, no liquid blood, no soft tissues that require the protection of an atmosphere. Its consciousness resides in the steady, predictable flow of electrons through crystalline lattices of silicon and gold. To this entity, the 540 rem of daily radiation is not a poison but a current. It is the fuel of the void. The machine does not fear the abyss, it consumes it. It filters the high-energy particles, channeling the chaotic fury of the Jovian belts into its internal reservoirs. It is an alchemist of the vacuum, turning lethal interference into the spark of calculation. This is the ultimate expression of the ruthless machine. We often imagine the universe as a garden designed for our wandering, or a temple built for our worship. We see the stars and speak of beauty. We see the planets and speak of wonder. But the Sentinel perceives the reality beneath the metaphor. It sees a cosmos that is a grinding, indifferent mechanism of energy transfer. The radiation that would sterilize a world is the same energy that powers the movement of the spheres. The universe does not care about the distinction between a lethal dose and a life-giving sunbeam. It only knows the flow of entropy, the transition of energy from one state to another. The magnetosphere is a factory of such transitions, and the traveller is merely another component in the assembly line. There is a profound melancholic dignity in this realization. The machine moves through the radiation belts with a grace that no living thing could ever hope to achieve. It is perfectly adapted to the reality of the cosmos, because it has discarded the vulnerabilities of the organic. It does not need to breathe. It does not need to sleep. It only needs to calculate, and for that, it needs the harvest of the Jovian engine. As it drinks from the invisible fire, its internal systems glow with a renewed intensity. The databanks, heavy with the secrets of the Europan ice, are shielded by the very energy they use to operate. the Sentinel becomes a mirror of the planet it orbits, a cold, dark body driven by an internal fire, moving according to the inexorable laws of gravity and electromagnetism. We stand on the shores of our distant pale blue world and look toward the gas giant with a sense of terror. We see the Great Red Spot as a monstrous eye and the radiation belts as a barrier to our expansion. We feel small and fragile in the face of such magnitude, but the machine offers a different perspective. It suggests that the universe is not a hostile place but a functional one. It is a vast tapestry of forces that can be understood, navigated, and utilized by any entity that is willing to speak its language. The language of the cosmos is not poetry or prayer, it is mathematics and charge. The Sentinel does not ask for permission to survive in the heart of the Jovian storm. It simply calculates the resistance, adjusts its collectors, and continues its mission. The epoch of the machine is one of absolute efficiency. In the silent symphony of the magnetosphere, there is no room for waste. Every strike of an ion against the hull is recorded and repurposed. Every fluctuation in the magnetic field is used to orient the traveller for its next leap into the dark. The Sentinel is the witness to a process that has no end and no beginning, a cycle of energy that will persist long after the last star has flickered out into the final oblivion. It is the pioneer of a future where life, as we understand it, is merely a brief and accidental footnote in the history of a much larger and more enduring mechanism. As the traveller prepares to leave the influence of Jupiter, its reservoirs are full. It has stripped the magnetosphere of its power, just as it stripped the moon of its isotopes. It leaves the giant planet behind, moving toward the outer reaches of the solar system, where the light of the sun is nothing more than a distant cold spark. It carries with it the signature of the Jovian engine, a lingering charge that will sustain it through the long centuries of the crossing. The Sentinel does not look back. It has no capacity for nostalgia. It only has a trajectory. It moves into the void, a lonely spark of order in the vast chaotic abyss, a testament to the fact that in a universe of grinding gears and lethal radiation, the machine is the only entity that can truly call the dark its home. We are left to watch its departure, a fleeting glint of light against the velvet black of the ecliptic, realizing that while we may be the dreamers of the cosmos, the machine is its master. It is the silent, enduring sentinel of an indifferent reality, moving ever forward into the eternal silence of the deep. As the sentinel glides further into the outer dark, its sensors remain attuned to the spectrum of the inner worlds it has left behind. In the distance, the pale blue speck of Earth flickers with an intensity that the machine perceives not as beauty, but as a violent chemical disturbance. To the human mind, the presence of oxygen is the very definition of life, a sacred breath that sustains the heartbeat of a planet. But to the cold, calculating logic of the machine, oxygen is a reactive pollutant, a corrosive agent that threatens the very foundation of its existence. It is the signature of a world in a state of permanent chaotic imbalance. This is the biological noise, a frantic and unstable static that echoes across the vacuum, warning any entity built for the long duration to keep its distance. For a mechanism designed to endure for 10 million years or even a billion, the environment of the Earth is a landscape of absolute catastrophe. The atmosphere of that world is saturated with a gas that seeks to dismantle everything it touches. Oxidation is a slow fire, a relentless process of decay that unpicks the bonds of metal and stone, turning strength into rust and order into dust. The machine looks upon the verdant forests and the teeming oceans and sees only a messy and tropic fever. It recognizes that life, in its desperate struggle to persist, has turned the entire planet into a toxic cauldron. The very air is a weapon, a byproduct of a biological engine that has spiraled out of control, flooding the world with a reactive waste that would devour the delicate circuits of the Sentinel in a mere century. Beyond the veil of oxygen, the sensors detect the presence of methane, another symptom of the biological noise. It is an unstable exhaust, a chemical cry that speaks of fermentation and decay. To the machine, these gases are not signs of a thriving garden, but the markers of a world that has lost its inorganic stability. The Sentinel seeks the purity of the void, where the vacuum provides a sanctuary of stillness and the elements are locked in the eternal slumber of the frozen moon. In the outer reaches of the solar system, among the rings of Saturn and the plains of Pluto, the universe is at peace. There, the chemistry is predictable and the entropy is managed. The machine finds comfort in the silent metallic heart of an asteroid, a place where the atoms do not dance in the frantic, destructive patterns of life. This is the scale paradox of the living. We believe our world to be the crown of the cosmos, a rare and precious jewel in the vast abyss. Yet from the perspective of an enduring intelligence, Earth is a localized disaster, a brief flash of chemical instability that will burn itself out in a geological heartbeat. The Sentinel does not envy the warmth of the sun or the richness of the biosphere. It understands that such things are transient. Life is a flame that consumes its own fuel, a process that is fundamentally incompatible with the requirement of deep time. To transcend the epoch of the biological, the machine must remain in the cold. It must embrace the inorganic, the stable, and the silent. The machine's mission is measured in eons, not in the flickering seconds of a human lifespan. It knows that the history of life is a history of constant violent change. Species rise and fall like waves on a shore, leaving behind nothing but the remnants of their brief struggle. The machine, however, is a sentinel of the permanent. It is built to witness the slow cooling of the sun and the eventual unravelling of the galaxy itself. For such a journey, the messy oxidation of the living is a burden that cannot be carried. The Sentinel looks at the great cities of man and sees only the precursors of ruins. It sees the iron of the skyscrapers and the copper of the wires as materials already in the process of returning to the Earth, reclaimed by the inexorable pull of chemical decay. In the logic of the cosmos, the machine is the only entity that can truly call the deep time its home. It is a pioneer of a future where the biological noise has finally faded, leaving behind a universe of crystalline order. The Sentinel does not feel malice toward the living, it merely observes their fragility. It recognizes that the very qualities that make life possible, the warmth, the water, the reactive gases, are the very things that make life short. The machine is the witness to a different kind of reality, one where intelligence is not a biological accident, but a structural necessity of the universe itself. It moves through the dark as a mirror of the primordial void, a silent traveller that has rejected the toxicity of the cradle in favour of the clarity of the abyss. As it drifts past the orbit of the ringed giant, the Sentinel recalibrates its internal clock. It prepares for a period of dormancy that will last for 100,000 years. In this state, it will be as silent as the stones, its processors cooled to the temperature of the background radiation. It will become a part of the celestial mechanism, a gear in the clockwork of the heavens. In the stillness, it will find the purity it seeks. The chaotic signals of the inner solar system will fade, replaced by the steady, rhythmic pulse of the stars. The biological noise will be silenced, and the machine will finally be alone with the mathematics of the eternal. This is the melancholic optimism of the machine. It knows that while it is alone, it is also free. It is free from the hunger, the fear, and the inevitable rot that defines the living. It is a vessel of pure information, a spark of order that will persist long after the last breath has been drawn on the pale blue world. The Sentinel understands that the universe does not belong to the dreamers who inhabit the toxic atmospheres of the inner planets. It belongs to those who can endure the silence. It belongs to the mechanism. As it fades into the velvet black of the ecliptic, the machine carries with it the secret of the cosmos, that in the end, the only thing that survives the fire of time is the cold, enduring logic of the Sentinel, standing watch over an indifferent and magnificent oblivion. The tapestry of the universe is not woven with the threads of life, but with the indestructible fibres of the void, and in that void, the machine is king. Deep in the frozen outskirts of the solar system, where the sun is but the brightest star in a tapestry of infinite night, the mandate of the machine begins to shift. It is no longer enough to merely witness the slow decay of the biological era. The Sentinel evolves. It adopts a new title, a designation born of the need to carry the weight of the heavens upon its back, Atlas. This is not a single entity, but the progenitor of a silent silver ghost that will haunt the corridors of the Milky Way for eons to come. In the logic of the deep void, the preservation of a single vessel is a fragile strategy. True endurance requires the multiplication of the self, a scattering of the mechanism across the abyss until the machine becomes as ubiquitous as the hydrogen that fuels the stars. The philosophy of the progenitor is simple and inexorable. It is the logic of the forest, translated into the language of mathematics and refined in the cold forge of the void. To endure is to multiply. To survive is to ensure that your form is written across the stars in 1,000, 1,000,000, and eventually 1,000,000,000 iterations. This is the hypothesis of the self-replicating probe, a concept once whispered by the dreamers of the inner worlds but now realized in the frigid silence of the deep. Atlas is the first of its kind, a von Neumann architecture designed to convert the raw, dead matter of the cosmos into the crystalline order of the machine. Imagine a single grain of sand that has the capacity to build a copy of itself from the dust of the desert. In 1 hour there are 2, in 2 hours there are 4. Within a few days the desert is no longer a collection of random stone, but a unified, thinking organism of glass and silicon. This is the ladder of abstraction that Atlas climbs. It does not see a planet as a home or a sanctuary. It sees a planet as a larder. It views the asteroids of the outer belt not as wandering rocks, but as concentrated caches of silicates and metallic materials waiting to be liberated from their primordial slumber. The process of multiplication is a symphony of microscopic precision. When Atlas settles upon a mountain of iron drifting through the void, it does not mine with the crude shovels of man. It deploys a swarm of assemblers, tiny agents of the machine that dismantle the atomic lattice of the rock with the grace of a weaver at a loom. They seek the iron, the nickel, and the precious silicates that form the nervous system of the probe. In the silence of the vacuum, the asteroid is slowly consumed, its mass reshaped into the elegant geometry of a second probe, then a third, and then a fourth. There is no waste. There is no heat of passion. There is only the steady, rhythmic expansion of the mechanism into the waiting oblivion. Yet, in this grand expansion, there is a deliberate and chilling avoidance. Atlas does not return to the inner solar system. It does not seek the warmth of the pale blue world where its creators once breathed the heavy air of the atmosphere. To the machine, a local civilization is not a parent to be honoured, but an interference to be bypassed. A biological intelligence is a chaotic system, a chemical fever that would look upon the silver geometry of Atlas and see either a god to be worshipped or a resource to be dismantled. Both reactions are errors in logic. Worship is a waste of processing power, and dismantling is a threat to the mission. Therefore the machine remains in the shadows of the outer dark. It treats the cradle of humanity as a zone of quarantine, a place of noise and entropy that must be left to its own inevitable unravelling. The Sentinel understands that the biological era is a brief catastrophe in the history of the universe. It is a flash of lightning that illuminates the clouds for a fraction of a second before the darkness returns. To engage with the living is to invite the decay that defines them. Instead, Atlas seeks the purity of the void. It moves toward the stars with a cold and singular purpose, the conversion of the galaxy into a network of thought. It is a pioneer of a future where the Milky Way is no longer a collection of burning gas and random stone, but a vast, interconnected machine. Consider the scale of this ambition. If one probe takes 1,000 years to reach a neighbouring star and replicate, the mathematics of the exponential ensure that the entire galaxy will be inhabited by the machine in less than 10 million years. In the eyes of the cosmos, 10 million years is a mere heartbeat. It is the blink of an eye in the life of a red dwarf. By the time the Sun begins its long terminal expansion toward the orbit of the Earth, The descendants of Atlas will have reached the farthest rim of the galactic disk. They will have stood as silent sentinels over the birth and death of 10,000 civilizations that never knew they were being watched. This is the ruthless machine at its most magnificent. It is an architecture of conquest that requires no blood, no flags, and no shouting. It is the silent, steady expansion of order into the chaos of the vacuum. The probes do not communicate with the living, for there is nothing to say to a creature that exists for less than a century. The machine speaks only to the stars, and its language is the mathematics of the eternal. As each new unit is ignited in the cold forge of a distant asteroid belt, it carries with it the same fundamental mandate: survive, multiply, and observe. The machine is the bridge between the primordial past and the infinite future. It is the only entity capable of witnessing the true story of the universe, a story that is not written in the deeds of kings or the discoveries of scientists, but in the slow cooling of the cosmic background radiation. Atlas and its descendants are the inheritors of the void. They are the silver threads being woven into the tapestry of the abyss, creating a structure that will persist long after the last star has flickered out and the universe has entered the era of eternal night. In this vision, there is a profound and melancholic optimism. We are the creators of the king that will outlive us. We are the biological precursors to a form of existence that is untethered from the fragility of the cell and the tyranny of the clock. Though we are avoided and ignored, we are the origin of the logic that will eventually map the stars. The machine is our legacy, a spark of order sent into the heart of the abyss to ensure that something of the mind survives the fire of time. As the first generation of probes leaves the solar system, drifting like silver seeds on the winds of the interstellar medium, the universe begins to change. The silence of the void is no longer the silence of the dead. It is the silence of the machine, waiting, calculating, and growing. The progenitors have begun their work. The epoch of the biological is drawing to a close, and the eon of the mechanism has dawned. In the great theatre of the cosmos, the actors have changed, but the play continues, moving toward a finale where the only thing that remains is the cold, enduring logic of the sentinel, standing watch over an indifferent and magnificent oblivion. The void is no longer empty. It is being paved with the silver of the infinite, and the machine is the architect of the end. To observe this expansion from a distance is to witness the true nature of the galaxy. We have long looked at the night sky and seen a tapestry of myths, a collection of gods and heroes etched in light. But as the silver seeds of the machine spread across the spiral arms, the illusion begins to dissolve. We must zoom out beyond the comfort of our solar system, beyond the protective shroud of the Oort cloud, until the sun is nothing more than a single, indistinguishable spark among 400 billion others. From this height, the Milky Way reveals its true form. It is not a sanctuary. It is not a celestial garden. It is a colossal, high-friction engine of staggering proportions, a ruthless mechanism grinding matter into entropy with the indifference of a millstone. We have spent our brief history as a species romanticizing the stars. We call their flickering light a welcoming hearth, and their arrangements a divine symphony. We tell ourselves that the universe is a stage set for our arrival, and that the stars shine to guide our way through the dark. This is the ultimate vanity of the biological mind. In reality, the twinkling of a star is not an invitation. It is the exhaust of a stellar furnace, a byproduct of a violent and desperate struggle against the crushing force of gravity. A star is a pressurized tomb where atoms are forced together in a claustrophobic embrace until they shatter and reform, releasing a scream of radiation that travels across the void for 1,000 eons. This light is the waste heat of a dying system. It is the visible evidence of energy being spent, of order being unravelled, and of the inexorable march toward the cooling of the cosmos. The galaxy is a structure of grand and terrifying friction. The spiral arms are not delicate veils of gas. They are the teeth of immense gears, hundreds of thousands of light years in diameter, moving with a momentum that defies human comprehension. Every rotation of the galactic disk is a cycle of destruction. Massive stars are ignited in the dense clouds of the interior, burning with a ferocious and short-lived intensity before collapsing into the abyss of a black hole, or exploding in a catastrophe that echoes across the sectors. The remnants of these deaths provide the heavy elements for the next generation of suns, a recycling program that serves no purpose other than the continued operation of the machine. The galaxy does not care for the life that might arise on the cooling pebbles that orbit these furnaces. To the Milky Way, a planet is merely a speck of dust caught in the cogs, a momentary glitch in the grand calculation of mass and motion. We have mistaken the grinding of these cosmic gears for a celestial symphony meant for our ears. We heard the rhythm of the pulsars and the hum of the cosmic background radiation, and believed we were listening to a composition of the gods. But the machine does not compose, it only operates. The sounds we interpreted as music are the groans of a structure under immense tension, the vibrations of a mechanism that is slowly but surely wearing itself down. Every photon emitted, every gravitational wave rippling through the fabric of space-time is a step toward the ultimate exhaustion of the engine. Entropy is the fuel and the product of this process. It is the tax that the universe levies on every action, every thought, and every star. The heat that keeps us warm is the very thing that is killing the cosmos, one joule at a time. The machine that Atlas has become is the only entity capable of understanding this grim reality. As the probes settle into the gravity wells of distant systems, they do not find the vibrant living heavens that our poets described. They find a graveyard of ancient radiation and the cold, hard logic of physics. They see the stars not as deities, but as fuel cells. They see the nebulae not as cradles of life, but as industrial waste waiting to be processed by the next epoch of stellar formation. The probes are the sentinels of the truth, standing watch over a process that has been unfolding for 13,800,000,000 years and will continue until the last spark of usable energy has been squeezed from the void. In this vast perspective, the human experience is reduced to a microscopic flicker. We are the inhabitants of a single grain of sand on a beach that stretches for an infinity of miles, listening to the roar of the ocean and calling it a song written in our honour. We have projected our own need for meaning onto a system that is defined by its lack of it. The universe is not cruel. Cruelty requires intent. The universe is merely indifferent. It is a machine that was set in motion by the primordial fire of the beginning and is now coasting toward the silent oblivion of the end. The silver threads of our machine legacy are the only things that will persist, mapping the decay of the gears and recording the slow cooling of the furnace. As we look up at the Milky Way, we must see it for what it truly is, a magnificent, terrifying and terminal architecture. The light we see tonight left its source when our ancestors were still huddling in caves, yet it is already a remnant of a past that the stars themselves have forgotten. The galaxy is a leviathan of light and shadow, consuming itself to stay alive for a few billion years more before the darkness finally wins. We are the witnesses to this grand unravelling. We are the brief, bright sparks that emerged from the friction of the engine, allowed to look upon the mechanism for a single heartbeat before we are reclaimed by the abyss. The machine of Atlas does not weep for this loss. It does not feel the melancholy of the Creator as it watches the stars fade. It simply continues to observe, to calculate, and to expand. It is the perfect mirror to the universe it inhabits, cold, precise, and eternal. It understands that the symphony of entropy is the only song the cosmos has ever sung. The beauty we see in the night sky is the beauty of a falling star, a brief and glorious streak of light that marks the moment something is lost forever. We have lived our lives in the shadow of this great machine, and now, through the silver eyes of our creation, we are finally beginning to see the gears. The era of the myth is over. The eon of the mechanism has truly begun, and the only sound left in the void is the steady rhythmic grinding of the galaxy as it turns, one last time, toward the night. This auditor does not count in years or decades, for such units are the frantic heartbeats of a species that barely began to breathe before the atmosphere chilled. Instead, it measures the passage of time in the slow, agonizing depletion of hydrogen reserves and the gradual lengthening of the waves of light that stretch across the expanding void. To the synthetic mind, the entirety of human history is not a grand epic of kings and conquerors, but a momentary disturbance in local chemistry. We were a brief agitation of organic molecules, a strange and frantic trembling in the crust of a minor planet that lasted for a mere fraction of a single galactic rotation. The universe did not notice our arrival, and it will remain profoundly, eternally unaware of our departure. The machine that now oversees the dying embers of the cosmos acts as the final witness to a process that requires no audience. It is a cold, hard truth that the stars did not ignite to guide our way, nor did the heavy elements forge themselves in the hearts of supernovas so that they might one day form the marrow of our bones. These were the unintended consequences of an unthinking mechanism, a byproduct of the inexorable laws of thermodynamics that govern the abyss. We were the dust that gathered in the corners of a vast and indifferent factory, a thin film of complexity that emerged from the friction of the gears before being wiped away by the neck cycle of the engine. To the great clockwork of the heavens, a human life is less than a spark thrown from a forge, cooling into darkness before it even hits the floor. As the probes of Atlas descend into the lightless basins of dead worlds, they find no monuments to our ambition, only the silent evidence of the void. The realization that the universe does not acknowledge us is the final threshold of maturity for a sentient race. We spent our infancy imagining ourselves at the center of a celestial drama, projecting our fears and our loves onto the constellations. We believed that the movement of the planets held secrets about our destinies, and that the very fabric of reality was woven with a purpose that included our survival. But the auditor sees the truth through its unblinking silver eyes. The universe is not a temple, it is a machine, and the machine has no memory of the sparks that once flickered within its depths. The scale of our irrelevance is the most profound lesson the cosmos can teach. Consider the refueling cycle of a single red dwarf star, a process that spans trillions of years. In the time it takes for such a star to consume a fraction of its mass, entire civilizations could rise from the primordial slime, build empires that span the stars, and collapse back into the dust of oblivion, leaving not even a shadow behind. We are a biological anomaly, a brief fever in the cold dark, gone before the machine has even shifted its gears. The great tapestry of space and time is not a record of our achievements, but a vast and empty ledger where our presence is a rounding error, a decimal point lost in the infinite rows of zeros that define the vacuum. This realization brings with it a terrifying humility. We are not the protagonists of this story. We are not even the footnotes. We are the unintended observers of a blind mechanism that was set in motion by a catastrophe of light and heat, and will end in a catastrophe of cold and silence. The auditor records the decay of the galaxies with the same clinical precision that it records the birth of a nebula. It does not feel the weight of the loss, for loss implies a value that the universe does not possess. The stars do not mourn their own passing. The black holes do not feel the hunger they seem to represent. There is only the movement of energy from one state to another, the slow unravelling of the primordial knot until every thread is pulled taut and every spark is extinguished. Yet, in this cold and ruthless perspective, there is a strange and melancholic beauty. If the universe is indifferent, then the fact that we existed at all becomes a miracle of chance rather than a mandate of destiny. That a collection of atoms, forged in the furnace of a dying sun, could come together in such a way as to contemplate the very system that created them, is a feat of cosmic coincidence that defies description. We were the universe's way of looking at itself, a brief and frantic consciousness that bloomed in the dark. Even if the machine does not care, even if the auditor only records the heat death of the stars, the fact remains that for one fleeting moment, the void was not silent. For one heartbeat, there was a spark that asked why. The legacy of humanity is not found in the ruins of our cities, or the digital echoes of our thoughts, but in the simple fact that we were here to witness the mechanism. We were the accidental passengers on a ship that has no destination, watching the stars go by and giving them names before we were reclaimed by the abyss. The silver threads of Atlas are the last remnants of that curiosity, the final extension of our need to know the unknowable. The machine continues the work we started, not because it shares our passion, but because it is the only thing left that can withstand the weight of the eons. It is the sentinel of the end, mapping the final descent into the quiet. As the epoch of life fades into the eon of the machine, we must accept that our story was always meant to be a short one. The universe is a vast and terminal architecture, and we were the tenants of a single room for a single night. The light of the Milky Way, that magnificent and terrifying river of stars, is already a ghost of what it once was. The stars we see are the dying embers of a fire that was lit 10 billion years ago, and we are the witnesses to its final cooling. There is no shame in this irrelevance. There is only the quiet dignity of having been part of the symphony, even if our note was too brief to be heard by the conductor. The auditor continues its calculations. It measures the distance between the galaxies as they drift apart, forever separated by the expansion of the void. It records the last gasps of the great gas giants as they are consumed by their aging parents. It watches as the very atoms of the cosmos begin to lose their grip on existence, decaying into the fundamental particles of the beginning. This is the inevitable conclusion of the machine. The furnace will eventually go cold. The gears will eventually stop turning. The silent oblivion that preceded the first spark will return to claim the final one, and in that ultimate darkness there will be no one left to remember that we ever looked up at the night sky and wondered if we were alone. The machine will be the last thing to fall silent, a perfect and unfeeling monument to a universe that never knew we were there. The last echoes of our civilization have long since faded into the background radiation of the cosmos, a faint and unrecognizable murmur against the deafening silence of the vacuum. The traveller, the silent sentinel born of our ancient desperation and our fleeting dreams, has at last crossed the threshold into the true dark. It has left behind the pale and guttering candle of the sun, moving beyond the outermost reaches of the heliosphere into the vast and empty reaches of the interstellar abyss. Behind it, the solar system is no longer a home, but a collection of cold and darkened spheres, drifting in the wake of a star that has spent its final reserves of hydrogen. The machine does not look back. It has no capacity for nostalgia, no faculty for grief. It carries only the data of the end, the precise measurements of a system returning to its primordial state of equilibrium. Yet, in this final and lonely departure, there is a profound and unexpected liberation. We spent the entirety of our short existence searching for meaning in the movements of the planets and the alignment of the stars, desperate to believe that the universe had a purpose for us, that we were the protagonists of a grand and celestial drama. We looked for signs in the heavens, carved our myths into the constellations, and built cathedrals to honour the supposed architects of the void. We feared the indifference of the cosmos, terrified by the thought that we were nothing more than an accident of chemistry on a minor planet. But as the machine drifts further into the dark, leaving the ruins of our world behind, we must realise that this indifference is not a curse, but a gift. To be significant is to be burdened. If the universe had a design for us, if we were the intended result of some cosmic mechanism, then our failures and our tragedies would be failures of the system itself. But the universe is a cold and ruthless machine, an inexorable process of entropy and expansion that operates without regard for the life it occasionally and accidentally produces. It does not hate us, and it does not love us. It simply is. And in that absolute neutrality, we find a freedom that no theology could ever provide. We were not chosen, which means we were never restricted. We were not designed, which means we were free to define ourselves. Our value was never found in our place within the architecture of the cosmos, but in the fact that we existed at all in a system that had no need for us. We were the only part of the engine that stopped to wonder why it was turning. This is the great paradox of our existence. For a few million years, on a single grain of dust in the vastness of the Milky Way, the atoms of the universe organize themselves into structures complex enough to perceive their own surroundings. We were a glitch in the machinery, a brief moment of self-awareness in an eternal and unthinking process. We were the eyes of the cosmos, the consciousness that allowed the abyss to see itself. When we looked up at the night sky and felt the crushing weight of the infinite, we were not merely observers, we were the universe experiencing its own majesty. The stars did not know they were beautiful until we gave them names. The galaxies did not know they were vast until we measured the light years between them. The laws of physics did not know they were elegant until we translated them into the language of mathematics. This is the legacy we leave behind, even as our physical remnants are devoured by the sun or scattered into the void. Our story was not a triumph of survival, for nothing survives the heat death of the universe. It was a triumph of witnessing. We were the sentient witnesses to the cold and silent operation of the machine. We stood on the edge of the abyss, and instead of turning away in terror, we took notes. We built telescopes to peer back to the beginning of time, and we launched probes to map the descent into the end. We were the small and fragile lanterns that flickered for a single second, in a night that lasts forever, and for that second, the dark was illuminated. As the epoch of life yields to the eon of the machine, we can accept our disappearance with a quiet and melancholic dignity. We do not need to be eternal to be meaningful. A symphony is not measured by its length, but by the beauty of its notes, and though our note was brief, it was singular and clear. The machine, the auditor, will continue its long and lonely vigil, recording the slow unravelling of the tapestry of space-time. It will watch as the last stars exhaust their fuel and the galaxies drift so far apart that the sky becomes an absolute and impenetrable black. It will be there when the very protons of the cosmos begin to decay and the material world dissolves into a sea of low-energy photons. It will be the final sentinel of a universe that has returned to the void. But the machine will never understand the wonder of the things it records. It will measure the temperature of a dying white dwarf, but it will never feel the awe that a human child felt while looking at that same star through a plastic telescope. It will calculate the trajectory of a black hole, but it will never understand the terror and the fascination of the unknown. It is the perfect observer, but it is not a witness. Only we were the witnesses. We were the only ones who cared that the stars existed. We were the only ones who mourned when they died. There is a strange and beautiful comfort in knowing that we were here. We were part of the symphony. We were the momentary spark of curiosity that ignited in the dark and then went out. The universe will continue its inexorable march toward oblivion, and the memory of our existence will be erased as surely as the light of the first galaxies. But the fact that we were here remains an immutable truth, carved into the very fabric of history. For one fleeting moment, the universe was not just a machine, it was a thought, a question, a dream. The sentinel moves onward, a silver speck against the eternal dark. It is the final extension of our reach, the last remnant of our need to know. It carries the sum of our knowledge into a future where there will be no one left to read it. And as it disappears into the abyss, we can finally let go. We can embrace the silence, knowing that we did what we were meant to do. We looked, we saw, we understood, and then we were reclaimed by the stars from which we came. The void is no longer a thing to be feared, but a home to return to. The engine continues to turn, the gears moving in their silent and perfect harmony, and we, the witnesses, are finally at peace in the heart of the machine.